Okay, welcome to the next module here in the buyer course. And I'm going to be talking about a walkthrough and the closing. So congratulations. You're almost there. You're almost at the closing. I always joke about that whenever I'm going through the process of my buyers, we're always congratulating as we get one step closer to the closing table and everything's going to be good. So this is not going to be a very long module. Going to kind of go through this pretty quickly. And so let me get to the appropriate slides, the buyer course for realtors, the walkthrough and the closing. Like I said, this is it. So before the closing, review your file, make sure everything's in place, get signatures on any documents that are missing for the closing. Most offices are good about providing you a checklist of what is missing. And I like to do that before the closing. I don't like to be scrambling at the last minute, getting signatures from buyers and closing at sellers at the closing because they've got to sign all the closing docs. Now, I always do the walkthrough. I'm going to talk about that. I try to get the picture of my buyer at the walkthrough. They're excited that we use for the testimonial in front of the property. I always attend the closings and I always have a closing gift. So I had to do this module over because I skipped this slide. Okay. So the walkthrough. Now, when you do the walkthrough, like I said, I always do the walkthrough. You want to have at least one of the buyers there at the walkthrough. Now, if you're dealing with out-of-state buyers, and maybe they've got a friend, maybe they've got a relative, but it'd be nice to have somebody else come to the walkthrough besides yourself, so that way you don't have full responsibility. The big thing about the walkthrough, just make sure everything's okay. There hasn't been any additional damage, any issues since the inspection, because that's usually the last time you were in the property. Make sure there's no water damage, make sure there's no roof damage, make sure they didn't have a huge party and a lot of holes in the wall or whatever. So it's pretty easy. Just kind of walk through, make sure everything is pretty normal. And then if there were issues before, they're still going to be there. Review the inspection items. So if there's inspection items that you need to review, you can do it at the walkthrough. Now, what happens on the inspection items, they will provide you documentation at the closing or before the closing of all the receipts, all the work that was done on the property. So make sure that you get that. I usually like to get it at the walkthrough so that way we can look at it and then my buyers have a copy of it. Check out the furnace. If it's, 30 degrees outside and the furnace is not working, that's a red flag. When your buyers are buying the property, they need to have a working furnace. I had this happen a number of years ago where the AC all of a sudden went out and the sellers had to come at the last minute to get it fixed, but it was good that we did the walkthrough. No damage. And then if there's cleaning that the seller agreed to, maybe it's done before the walkthrough or definitely before the closing. Now, before the closing, this is just a quick checklist. You want to review the buyer settlement that you're going to get from the title rep. Make sure the lender reviews that and goes through that with your buyer. Closing times, I usually like to do mid-morning or early afternoon. Early mornings, sometimes the wire is not there from the bank. Late afternoons, if you need to get a hold of the bank, a lot of times they're closed. Like in Colorado, if I have a closing and it's going up to 5 o'clock and the bank is in the East Coast, 7 o'clock, sorry, you're out of luck. You're not going to get the money until the next day. Find out if the sellers are going to be at the closing. Now, some of you might be in California or a state where you don't do closings the way we do it in Colorado. In Colorado, we have a closing at the title company. We're at a desk, a conference table. We got the buyer, we got the seller, buyer's agent, listing agent, lender. Everybody's there. We're all one happy family. Some states like California do it through escrow. Nobody's at the closing table. You don't have people there, but you still got to coordinate that process. So here, I like to try to find out ahead of time, is the seller going to be at the closing? So that way, if the buyer has any questions about the property, they can do it. Coordinate the possession time. So you coordinate the possession time. If it's going to happen at closing, great, you get the keys then. If the possession is going to be like you're closing on a Thursday, 3 o'clock, possession is Saturday at noon. Make sure you coordinate how that's going to happen by making sure that you got contact info for the seller. Buyers need to know where the title company is located. Pretty basic, but make sure you do that. And then review the cash at closing, cashier's check, or a wire funds transfer, and make sure that you get that from the title representative, from the lender in advance of the closing, so your buyer has time to either get a cashier's check or to do a wire funds transfer, and then make sure the directions are accurate and you're transferring the money to the appropriate uh, account. So that way it's not going to end up in the Grand Cayman Islands like in some John Grisham novel. And the title rep is like, woohoo, party time. But that's never happened. I'm just really joking here. And on the cashier's check, so get direction from the title rep or the lender of who to make the check out to. Nowadays, more and more title companies want the check made out to the title company. So verify that. I know in the past, I've had a lot of my buyers make the cashier's check out to themselves and they sign it over to the title company. But make sure you verify that with the title person. So at the closing, it's, not a lot of work for us as realtors. I mean, the title representative is going to run the show. You're pretty quiet unless you're addressed. You help your buyers when they need help. And ideally, it's best if the lender can be there at the closing, because the real estate documents are pretty simple to go through. They might have a few questions. The ones that are really confusing are the loan docs, and sometimes are the loans. I mean, they can be pretty big, and if you got a first and a second loan, then there's a lot of docs. So if you got the lender there, ideally that could really help. Have fun. Don't be too serious. Get the keys at the end of the closing if appropriate. Get the seller's contact info at the closing for the buyer. And that way, email, phone number. So that way, if the buyers have a question about, how the hot tub works or how the thermostat works once they're in the house, whatever it is. I know when I moved into my house years ago, the first Christmas came around and I got a bunch of Christmas gifts from Amazon. And so I'm like, woohoo, this is awesome. But, I called the previous seller and said, hey, you forgot to update your address file in Amazon, and make sure you come get your kids' presents. And they were there that day. Get your file, all your docs. You can get hard copy or email, and get your check at the end of closing and make sure that the check is okay. I always double check it before I leave. Sometimes they mix up the checks and sometimes there's a mistake. So make sure that that is all good. Closing gifts. Now, I think it's appropriate to give a closing gift. I give gift cards, and be creative. I mean, whatever you feel comfortable with. And a lot of times I'll give a gift card to a local restaurant so they can have a celebration dinner, maybe a home company, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. Be creative, do something that is representative of you. Listen to what the buyers say during the process, what they like, what they need, so that way you can get something that really fits their needs, and give an appropriate amount based on the sales price. So if you've got, $1 million deal, you're getting a $30,000 commission check, don't give a $15 gift card to Starbucks. That's more of an insult than anything. So if you got $1 million+ deal, I always give $100, $200 gift card for a nice restaurant. And that's just the way I do things, because you want them to remember you, have a good feeling. It's better to be generous than to be remembered as some cheapskate. And that's why I always think it's good to give a closing gift. Personalize it, and write a handwritten card, a nice letter, whatever it is. And then at the closing, make sure again you ask for a testimonial. You expect it based on what you've talked about before. And I'm always talking about the testimonial from the very first meeting all through the process, so that way they're kind of conditioned and it's not a surprise at the end that you're asking. Okay? Follow up. Now, this is a sign of a true professional. right after the closing for possession, make sure they got in the property okay. Keep in touch in that first few days. Make sure everything's going okay. One thing I didn't mention, but coordinate the utilities and make sure that your buyers call ahead of time to coordinate getting electricity and heat set up in the house, especially if you live in an area where it's 10 degrees at night. You don't want the pipes to freeze. So that's just, again, one of the things that you're going to normally do and people are not going to forget. Cable, phone, all that kind of stuff, that can all be done after the fact. But electricity and gas are really critical. Make sure that they do that. And again, I always try to make sure after they move in, everything okay, heat working, everything fine. And then just keep in touch. If it's close by, they're moving in, you want to swing by, check in, that's fine. Email, phone call, but just keep in touch and make sure everything's going good because invariably something is going to come up. It's not going to be catastrophic. They're not going to, don't be afraid, right? Stay in touch. You're a professional. And then after the fact, 1 month, 2 months, and so on. Email, phone call, stop by the house. If issues come up, problems come up, you're there. You're there to help. You're there for a resource, and just make sure you can take care of what they need. Now, one thing that I haven't talked a lot about is, and I usually do it at the closing, either in a URL or an email, provide them a service directory. Maybe this comes up in the inspection, but a list of all the people that you recommend that either you've used or your clients have used. So contractors, heating, air conditioning, plumbing, all those kind of things. And then that way they have that kitchen people, tile people, carpet people. I've got a whole list that I will give to all my customers. So that's it. The walkthrough and the closing, pretty straightforward, but make sure you do it. Make sure you do the walkthrough. Make sure you show up at the closing because that just completely locks you in. I mean, I hear horror stories where some agents, they don't go to the closing. I can't believe that. I don't know how that would work. And so, but make sure you do the walkthrough. Very, very important, and then just follow all the tips that I go through here. Everything's going to go smooth. And once you get to the closing, there's nothing better than being there with your buyers. They're excited. They're happy. They'll give you a hug. Oh, Mario, we couldn't have done this without you. Thank you so much. And that is, such a great feeling. I mean, for me, being a realtor, money is good. I enjoy my job. But one of the most fulfilling and meaningful aspects of what we do is the gratitude, is the good feeling, the karma that we create with our customers because we're helping them. We are making a huge difference in their lives. And I know I do. I know the buyers that I've helped, the sellers that I've helped, that if I wasn't involved in the process, it might not have gone as good as it turned out for my buyers. So I feel great about that. I really do. And even if it's $1 million deal, it's a $200,000 deal. I helped a buyer a couple summers ago, and she was buying a house for 200,000. And I never forget it. We're negotiating the price. The list price is 200,000. So my buyer goes in at 200K, and we're going to get the house, right? She's excited. So the seller counters back at 202, and I'm like, come on, give me a break. So the seller is squeezing my buyer for $2,000. So my buyer, she wants the house, and so she agrees to the counter for the $2,000. We go through the inspection. The furnace is shot. Heat exchanger dead, right? So we negotiate for a new furnace. And since the seller had been such kind of a tough nut to deal with, kind of a hard ass right in the beginning with that 202 thing, me and the buyer are like, gonna get a furnace. You're gonna pay $2,500. And that's what ended up happening. And my buyer was so grateful, so happy. that I was there to protect her through that, to fight for her to get the furnace. I had to be the bad guy, right? We can be the bad guy and then we can protect our buyer, just like the movie, right? You want me to be the bad guy? Fine, I'll be the bad guy. And that's what we have to do because we protect our clients. So I'm kind of rambling here at the end, but I just want you to appreciate what we do because when we're at the closing and we're helping our customers, we can have all these great stories like I tell you that I've helped my buyers over the years, my sellers, and I want you to get that hug. I want you to get that handshake. I want you to feel good, to feel empowered because you're helping people and you're getting a good check at the same time. Okay, well that's it for this module, and then we'll go on to the last one, which I think is the review. So here we go.